And welcome back. And we're moving into our first segment for the morning. Then again, another important topic, always interview to find out more about the British High Commissioner. Now we've got in with us none other than Peter Hughes. He's the British High Commissioner to Belize, but he's actually leaving us sometime soon. Mr. Hughes, it's so nice to see you, sir. Welcome and good morning.
And a good morning to both of you two and to everybody at home. It's really good to be here. I've kind of avoided being on TV the time I've been here, as you know.
Yes.
But now you've got me.
Yes, yes. At least we can say we're coming full circle. We had you early into your tenure, and now this is your exit interview before you leave in October.
The beginning of October, I fly out on the 1st of October. Not that I'm in a hurry, don't misunderstand.
Yeah, people don't like leaving Belize, I
No,
imagine.
they don't. No, they
But,
don't.
you know, this is a great time to reflect on the work that has been ongoing and you having the leadership role as the High Commissioner in Belize.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just start off by talking about some of the highlights for you personally.
I think if you go back to 5 years ago when I first came here at the end of August in 2013, I wouldn't say that the relationship between our two countries was bad. It was more, it just really wasn't particularly vibrant or dynamic. As you will recall, at that time, BATSUB was in mothballs. There were 6 soldiers just keeping it ticking over.
Oh.
The relationship between the UK and the Caribbean had gone very quiet. I think we were guilty of ignoring the Caribbean quite a lot. Since then, things have moved along a long way. Obviously, BATSUB is now back in full form.
Wow.
We have nearly 30 soldiers there now running the operation. We've trained more than 6,000 British soldiers since we reinvigorated in 2015. So that's something that I'm very proud of. We've had the recent announcement of scholarships. When I first arrived, we would be lucky to attract 1 scholarship or 2 scholarships a year. This year we're sending 9 young Belizeans to the UK to study in postgrad. So I think you can see there was a major shift in the way in which the UK is focusing not just on the Caribbean, but particularly on Belize.
Yeah.
You know, this leads me to ask, I'm sure you were actually welcoming of your success here in Belize. What was that like for you, having to negotiate so that we could actually benefit from what the UK has to offer?
It's what I do for my living. I negotiate the bilateral relationship between the two countries.
Yeah.
No head of mission, no ambassador, no high commissioner wants to leave on a negative note.
Yeah.
We all want that relationship to get better while we are in charge, as it were. And I think I can quite safely say that we are in a better place now than we were in 2013. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Now, looking at the past 5 years specifically, and I think BATSUB was definitely one of the issues that people are happy to see there's a larger presence. But part of what has really been the larger conversation is looking at the Belize Guatemala issue. And anytime we speak about the Belize Guatemala issue, the role of the British comes up. And I know that this is not something that we usually get to talk to you about, but since you are leaving, let me just ask from your perspective, as you see the conversation unfolding, as we head to this very important referendum, what are your thoughts?
I think actually that the people in Belize are not yet aware of how important that decision is in April of next year, the referendum itself. Before independence, we, the UK, tried everything we could think of to negotiate a settlement of the dispute, unsuccessfully. And we concluded at that time that the only way that this dispute was going to be resolved was by taking it to the International Court of Justice. And that's what we tried to do at the time. The Guatemalans were reluctant. So the big breakthrough was in 2008 when your government signed the special agreement with Guatemala to take the dispute to the International Court of Justice. And it's taken 10 years to get it to where it is now.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that. It wasn't a matter of Belize not wanting to go. The reluctance was on the other side of the border. Now we're in a position where the Guatemalans are ahead of Belize, but quite unusually. And it's important that Belizean people now look at the issues, understand what it's about. I've heard, for example, that people are comparing the ICJ with the Caribbean Court of Justice. Well, that doesn't work. They're totally different bodies and they have totally different focus. The Caribbean Court of Justice has passed some rulings recently that perhaps Belizeans feel a little bit unfair. The ICJ is not going to do that. The ICJ is there to state categorically that that border is still there. To my knowledge, there's not been a case at all in ICJ history where they've taken land away from one country and given it to another. So I don't think Belizeans should worry about waking up the day after the referendum and finding out that they're Guatemalan. That's not going to happen. So I'm very happy that we've got to where we are now. I think Belizeans should be happy too, because this dispute has been a dark cloud over this country for far too long, and it needs to be removed.
Now, when you talk about the education that is ongoing and the very important, it's very important that Belizeans are informed on all sides of the issue.
Absolutely.
And it really leads me to look at what took place in the UK with the Brexit referendum. And we know that is really a great example as to how important education and reaching out to all different age groups is important. What's your reflection? If you were to make to draw similarities between the two and perhaps lessons learned, what would it be?
I think the first lesson to learn is to be careful what you wish for, because you might actually get it. But in terms of the border dispute, the important thing, as you quite rightly say, is to understand what the issues are. I think there are so many misunderstandings out there as to what the dispute is. In fact, I can't even find out exactly what it is that Guatemala are claiming. Is it the whole of Belize? Is it 2/3 of Belize? My understanding, very simplistically, is that they say that the 1859 treaty no longer exists. Therefore, the border no longer exists. So the point of going to the ICJ is to get the ICJ to confirm actually that border does exist. And then Guatemala has no longer a claim. That's the important thing to do. A comparison between the two is not going to work. I mean, Brexit really, one way or the other, was a decision made by the people of the United Kingdom to leave the EU. The important thing for the referendum you're going to go through is that the people should decide which way they want to go with this. Do they want to live with a border dispute forever, or do they want to get it resolved?
Now, as a friend of Belize and contributing financially as well to maintaining the adjacency zone and the peace project, and even assisting in some of the funding in getting to this point, to the referendum, one of the concerns or one of the questions that has been continuously raised is there a pressure from the international community to have Belizeans go to the ICJ?
There is certainly from elements of the international community, from us, the UK, yes, from the friends of Belize, yes, there is, because we think that the economy of this country is being held back because of the dispute. Because you have instability, there's always going to be a reluctance or reticence on the part of investors to come here when there is a claim of this nature. So yes, there is some pressure from us, but from our perspective, we just want this process to be as good as it can be, and for as many Belizeans as possible to go out and vote in April of next year, because that's important. It is their future. It is the future of every Belizean that's going to be decided. And that is why we in the UK are about to contribute over $1 million Belize dollars to the information campaign, so that people have access to the understanding that they need.
Okay, this is definitely the hot topic at every corner that you go across this country. And one of the questions that came up to me yesterday was actually if Belize have the backing of the Brits, should Guatemala, if there was to be an invasion of this country, would Belize be covered under the British?
We don't have a formal security guarantee with this country, but you have BATSUB here. You have British soldiers training here. I think it's fair to say that the Guatemalans would not even consider coming across that border if there was a British Army unit here training. I think that's fair to say. But I think in the broader sense, I don't think Guatemala wants to do that anymore. We're in the 21st century now. We're not back in the 70s and 80s when Guatemala used to threaten to come over that border. That's not the issue anymore. The issue now is the legal framework under which these two countries will go forward.
Yeah. From the international standpoint, can you explain to us what the conversation has been like if Belize votes no in the referendum?
In the same way that I don't think there was a conversation in the UK about whether if we'd voted yes to Brexit, what we would do next. I don't think there's been much discussion about that yet. But I think everybody feels confident that Belize will vote yes. Perhaps that confidence is misplaced, which is another reason why it's important to get this information campaign up to a level where everybody has access to the information that they need. Because I think if there is a no, it would be a very sad event, because I don't think it's going to be easy to renegotiate going back to this process again. You can't keep having a referendum till you get the answer you want. You're going to get that one answer, and that's the way it's going to be.
And from your conversations, obviously being on the ground and the representative for the UK, you've been hearing the conversations, you've been communicating with from high level to everyday people. Do you feel that they're adequately informed?
Not yet, no. I don't think they are. I think at the higher level, yes, people do fully understand the process and they understand what is involved. But others in the wider community, no, I don't think so. And that is why we want to do as much as we can to support the process of informing. This is not a matter of the UK saying you must vote yes. This is a matter of the UK saying you must have access to the information you need to make a vote based on your conscience and your understanding of what is going to happen.
Now, it would be remiss of me to not bring in some of the points that the critics have brought up in this conversation, which is this is a problem with the UK and Guatemala, between the British and Guatemala. How do you respond to that?
Very, very simply. Independence brings with it responsibility. Once you became independent, the border dispute between Belize, the independent country, and Guatemala became your problem and not ours. Now that doesn't mean to say that we walked away. We did not. We would not have based a garrison here if we were going to walk away. We would not have maintained our political support for you all these years if that had been the case. But it is a simple matter. When you become independent, it becomes your issue.
One of the things that is, of course, taking a walk along with this conversation is also that we've got political figures saying yes, some political figures saying no. The importance of the educational aspect is there, we know that. But people continue to look at their political leaders as actually the leader, and their voice is actually the voice. What do you say in terms of this political divide on this situation?
This comes back to the need for people to inform themselves, because I understand what you're saying about political leaders, but it would be a shame, in my view, if this whole process was politicized and became a UDP versus PUP issue. It's not. It's an issue for the future of every single Belizean, irrespective of their political party and affiliation. And it would, I think, be unfair if it became a politicized issue.
Now, coming back to the broader issue, which is being able to fund the negotiations process, moving to the referendum, and maintaining the adjacency zone and the peace project there. We've heard repeatedly from the international community that it simply is not sustainable. Is that the case?
I think it's fair to say that the international community is becoming a little bit tired of the process. There's donor fatigue, as they tend to call it. There's certainly not going to be a bottomless pit of money for this process to continue forever. And one thing is for certain, that until such time as there is a full resolution of the border dispute, there's going to be a need for the OAS office at the adjacency zone to maintain an independent presence, to adjudicate on incidents, and to manage the peace process itself, the peace program. It has been difficult to find funding for that, there's no doubt. There are bigger issues in the world where money is needed right now. But we have managed to persuade the European Union that they should fund the OAS office for at least the next 3 years, and that funding should come through very soon, so that we can at least take that one problem off the agenda. Of course, what happens after the referendum depends on how you vote. But if people vote yes, then there will be an issue of funding putting forward the case to the ICJ, paying the lawyers, and lawyers are not cheap, as we know. But that is something that we will address at the time.
Now, having been here for the duration of the time from the signing of the special agreement now to the referendum, what's your parting shot to Belizeans?
I think it has to come back to Belizeans realizing that this referendum is it really is the last chance to get this dispute resolved. So please access the information, understand what is happening. If you don't understand, discuss it with people. There are lots of people out there who are willing to talk about it. There are people going around schools and churches to discuss what the ICJ referendum means in real terms. And when you've done that, I think the important thing is to vote. Because the worst thing that could possibly happen is we have a very small turnout, only those who want to vote no turn out. Everybody else decides to stay at home. That's not going to really reflect the voice of the Belizean people.
And looking at our critical referendum to the very critical referendum in the UK, which was the decision made in Brexit to leave the European Union, talk to us about what it has been like for you in being able to maintain affairs here in Belize and help us understand what the implications are for us.
Okay. I'm still trying to understand what the implications are for the UK, and let's be honest, most of my politicians are in that position. But we have been very careful to try and make sure that the countries with which we trade, the countries that are important to us, are not in any way affected by our decision to leave the EU. So, for example, we trade at the moment under the basis of the EU CARIFORUM free trade agreement. We have now in our legislation rolled over the terms of that so that trade with our partners in the CARIFORUM will continue under the same conditions as before. So sugar and bananas, for example, will still enter the UK under preferential access arrangements, as they do now, until such time as we can negotiate a separate free trade arrangement with CARIFORUM. So those two areas of your economy should not be affected. They're being affected by other things.
Now, the decision to leave the European Union, I think, is one that perhaps other regional organizations have looked at with concern. You know, is the integration process failing? Is it that perhaps when the strengths of a united body are only allowed for certain entities in that body, that some of those who perhaps can survive or feel they can survive without that body may leave? Talk to us about how you feel this reflects on the integration process.
I think the important thing is that multilateral bodies, no matter what they are, whether it's the EU, CARICOM, SICA, they all have to be relevant. They all have to have a dynamism. They all have to have a vision. And if the people within the countries that are part of that multilateral organizations cease to see the relevance and the vision, that is when you're going to have them questioning whether or not this organization, this setup should continue. And I think that's what you had with the UK and Brexit. The British public were becoming, I think, a bit fed up with the EU imposing rules upon us. And as you know, we don't like that kind of thing. But it's more than that. It's broader than that. There were fears over EU having a vision of becoming a United States of Europe, which we never wanted to be part of. We joined an economic union, not a political union. Then you had the problems faced over immigration and free movement of people. So it was a very complicated situation, but I think the public in the UK, 51% of them anyway, decided they didn't want a part of this anymore.
What was interesting was the generational gap in the voting. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's inevitable. I mean, I think if you look at the generation gap here in Belize over the referendum, anyone over the age of 40 is going to be very concerned about what the outcome of this referendum and what the ICJ means. Anyone under the age of 40, how important is that to them? There are other things in their life that take a much greater place. So you have a generation gap there too.
Now, as you said earlier on, you know, the British High Commission has been careful and in being able to speak of implications, especially when it comes to trade, as you're trying to figure out this exit strategy on your own.
Yes.
What is the timeline? I mean, how long do you talk about how it's going to happen or if it's going to happen?
We are obliged to leave the EU in March, April of next year. So we don't have a lot of time left to come up with a deal, which, if you've been looking at the press coming out of the UK, is becoming more and more of an issue, because are we going to leave without a deal? And what does that mean? Or will we get a deal, and will we really be leaving the EU? These are the issues that are being debated right now. But we have a very short time frame. Early next year we're supposed to leave.
April of next year.
Yeah.
Wow. You did shed light, though, on the Belizean economy from the standpoint, especially with this whole ICJ situation that lurks over us. One of the things that Belize have been strong on is actually tourism. And we've seen the growth of tourism over the past few years. As a matter of fact, looking to dip into into British, into that area of trying to get tourists from that area to come to Belize. Now, from your standpoint, how important do you think this is for us to make sure that we continue on in the right path with tourism?
The right path with tourism is basically, as you have at the moment, building up slowly. Yes, there's a huge untapped potential here for European tourists, and it's simply not being tapped because you don't have a runway long enough to take long-haul flights from Europe. When you get around to doing that, which you will, then you will see a big flood of Europeans coming in. But you've got to be prepared for that. You can't. It's not an overnight thing. You've got to have the bed spaces, you've got to have the hotels, you've got to have the resorts, you've got to have the infrastructure to take that influx. It's not there yet, but it will come. So I'm quite impressed with Belize's strategy, slowly building up your capacity, slowly building up the airlift that you have, until such time as you have the capacity to take the bigger numbers. But that's when you're going to have to come up with the big money to build that airport.
Yeah.
Within your tenure, 5 years, from 2013 to present,
yes.
What are you most impressed with our country in terms of moving forward as an independent country?
Well, the extent to which you realize how lucky you are. I think most Belizeans do, in their quiet moments, realize how lucky they are to live in such a beautiful country, to be in a situation where you have only growth ahead of you. I come from a country that, I wouldn't say that we've stopped growing, but you have to wonder when how much longer we can continue. Whereas this country has got a huge, huge potential future. So I think that is the one thing that impresses me the most. And the other thing is the warmth and friendliness of the Belizean people. There's no doubt about that. That's why our soldiers like to come and train here, because they're always welcomed by the Belizean people. It's why your tourists come here, because they find that warmth very attractive and they enjoy it.
Do you think it's the warmth that you're going to miss the most?
I think it's the whole place I'm going to miss the most, yes.
Now, you know, when you came 5 years ago, I'm sure, having had your own briefings before and getting a taste of the landscape, you probably identified some priority areas that you wish you would have been able to address. What would you say that had you had the time, the resources, or the cooperation, that you would have liked to have made some impact?
That's a how long is a piece of string question, really. I think the one area that I'm sorry that I haven't been able to have as much activity is education. I think the education system in this country could do with a boost. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that teachers and schools are not capable of what they're doing. They are. But there's a resource issue and there's a capacity issue. So if I'd had an open checkbook, then I would have wanted to do more with education, which is why I wanted to do more to get Belizeans to the UK on scholarships. And if I could just put a quick plug in right now, the applications process is open right now. If you feel that you've got the leadership qualities and you have a subject that you want to go and do a postgrad degree, and please apply online to to the Chevening website.
Yeah, and you know, Chevening has been, if we think of some of the people who have been Chevening scholars, they've all been leaders in our society, and that is the primary purpose of that scholarship.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about how you've seen the growth. 9 people are going to be traveling to do their postgrad in the UK.
I like the figure that I usually throw around, and that is since I arrived here, we've sent more than 30 Belizeans to the UK, an average of 6 a year. They've all been people with potential for leadership. They've all been people who are serious about what they want to do with their lives. It's important to have that vision in order to get the scholarship. And people who've wanted to come back and give to Belize what they've learned from us. So that isn't the main message. It's not about me, it's about my country.
Yeah, yeah. How competitive has it gotten over the years?
It's unbelievably.
Yeah.
Yes, we're taking 9 this year. I think we had in excess of 70 applications.
Wow. So it's growing.
So it's growing.
Yeah.
And it's not a numbers game, actually, because out of those 70, it was quite difficult to actually bring it down to a manageable number to actually interview, and then through that interview progress, bring it down even further to those who qualify. So those who got scholarships this year, last year, the year before we had 11, they have done incredibly well.
What are some of the subject areas, though? Because I'd like to say, you know what, we need more nurses and doctors to go out to the UK to learn more. But what are some of the subject areas that people could tap into?
People choose their own subject areas. They really got to fit in with what is a priority for Belize and what is a priority for our relationship. So we have people going to study environmental science. We have people going to study law. Mm-hmm. We have people going to study, not medicine sadly, but archaeology. Mm-hmm. If people wanted to go and study medicine, we will do our best to get them a scholarship. Mm-hmm. I've already tried to persuade 1 or 2 doctors here that they should go and do a specialism for a year in the UK. We could look at doing that. Mm-hmm. Nurses, the same thing. Mm-hmm. But we don't seem to get the applications. We can only deal with the people who apply.
Yeah. Now, what do you hope when these scholars travel to the UK, have their 1-year experience, other than learning what the weather is like and appreciating Belize? What do you hope the experience there will teach them to enhance the relationship in Belize?
I think the main thing about going to the UK is to broaden your horizons. Yeah. To realize what there is out there and what your potential is to fit into that. Belize is a small country. It has a small population. When you go to the UK and all of a sudden you're confronted with more than 60 million people in a very densely populated country that is very fast moving, your life is going to change. Yes. And I think the thing that I like to see when I see the scholars come back is how they have changed and how they now have an enthusiasm for passing that on the people around them.
Let's take you back into the reflective mode now. And I want to find out, on a personal level, what has been your most memorable moment in Belize in the past 5 years?
Ooh, there can't just be one. There's never just one.
Well, you could tell us more.
You could tell us more if you want.
I'm not going to get all romantic on this, but I think...
Why not?
Sunset in Placentia is really quite something. Particularly when there's a bit of cloud and it goes orange. My first trip into the Chickabull Forest. I think every Belizean should go to the Chickabull Forest on a regular basis just to see how magnificent it is. Mm-hmm. And I was taken in by Rafael Manzanero, who of course knows his way around the forest brilliantly. Oh, yes, he is. So for me it was a great experience. Yeah. Yes. So those 2 probably. The
2 best sides of Belize, the jungle and the beach.
Yes.
Yeah. So was Placentia your favorite space in Belize?
Destination, yeah.
Hopkins, Placentia, both.
Oh. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Should we do the punta test now, or
no?
I'd like to know.
At least a little bit of Creole.
No.
Really? Within the 5-year span you were here?
No, I'm really bad with languages. I have trouble with my own.
Yeah.
So, will there be a replacement?
Yes.
And what's and that's the reason why I asked for the question is, what do you say to this individual before coming here, or if they're here already, or upon getting to Belize?
Again, how long is your piece of string? I have a replacement. It's a lady called Claire Evans who will be arriving 3 or 4 days after I leave. She's coming from the UK where she was the Deputy Chief of Protocol. I have already said to her many, many things, but I think the main message is to arrive in Belize with an open mind and an open heart, because that is really the best way to deal with this country. Mm-hmm. Preconceived ideas don't work. This country is unique. It's different to anywhere really in the whole world. So you've got to open your eyes and open your heart.
I like that.
Yeah. And what's next for you?
Next for me is probably retirement. No one's offering me a job, so
my
I know it's sad. Hey, a lot of people think retirement's great fun, but I will let you know.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of people who come back here to retire, so it's always open.
It's always possible. I'm sure I will come back. I don't doubt that at all. This country has a special place for me. It is a special place for me. Yeah. I could not, I think, conceive of not coming back here. And there are projects in the pipeline that I want to come and see. Another quick plug from my government, if I may. Mm-hmm. The main things moving forward that we're working on is, of course, the coastal road, which we're going to be building, hopefully starting next year. Okay. And we're going to resurface the northern highways. So that's I think I worked out the numbers on the present exchange rate. It's more than $100 million we're going to be spending on those 2 roads alone. And a lot of other things too. We're doing a lot of work in the maritime area. We've just done seabed mapping, for example, around the port areas. Yeah. So that's big. And we're also going to strengthen some of your healthcare facilities. So I want to come back and see all this stuff. I don't want my name on the road, by the way. And see all this stuff when it's finished.
Yeah. Well, you'll get to Placentia or Hopkins even faster when the road is
Yeah,
Well, that will open up Dangriga, will open up the south
Yeah.
to economic development, which is great.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, we do appreciate you coming in and having this exit interview with us, and thank you for your time and contributions here in Belize.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the BTIA Tourism Expo. So stay tuned.